Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Talkin Tricks, and today we are going to be talking about transitions. Now, old fans of ours are going to remember that we have talked about this in the past, but we're constantly talking, constantly updating, and we do have some new ideas regarding transitions that we'd like to talk about today, and but also kind of give a brush up on transitions for those who are uninitiated. So, yeah, that's essentially what our plan is for today. So we could probably just start out with defining a transition because it could be trickier than you think. I think people understand it now, but there was a point in time there where like people would say transition in the wrong way, and I guess saying specifically to like setups and
Or
for
yeah, using tricks and as a using describing tricks as transitions when
mm-hmm,
those tricks are their own like have their own identity and actually have transitions in between the
mm-hmm,
trick that was done between that transition trick
yeah.
and at the end of that transition trick into the trick that they're transitioning into. So yeah,
To
there's
give
actually
more concrete examples of what Jason is saying, I'm saying like scoot is a transition would be incorrect because scoot is a trick, and there's a transition done into that scoot and a transition that happens out of that scoot. Um, but specifically, a transition is a movement that links two tricks together, and it does not terminate nor initiate a combo. And what we mean by that is the first thing that you do in a combo is not a transition. So, like, for example, the cheat step for like a cheat nine, that's not a transition. We can't say that was a vanish. We can't say that was a rapid or what have you. So,
And it's purely because there isn't a trick that comes before it.
exactly.
It's a completely fundamentally different kind of thing because it doesn't link two tricks one to another like a
Mm-hmm.
transition is meant to.
Yeah.
and it's not definitely not a terminator, right? Because we can't it's literally in the definition of a transition where two tricks are required to be at either end. And if there are no more tricks happening at the end of your combo, you're not transitioning out of a combo.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And the other thing about transition is they are necessary to essentially do a combo. Like there's no way for you to do a combo without having transitions in there. They're they are what make it keep going. And if you don't have a
Yeah.
transition,
There
then
there is only one way, and it's when you do combos consisting of a single trick.
oh, right. Is that a
Yeah.
combo? I don't know if
No.
I would count that as a combo. I'd be like that was a
It
trick.
is it is if we consider like literally every yeah if you have a definition of combo that includes any sequence of initiator, trick, transition, and then terminator, then
Mhm.
yes, because
You do
initiator,
initiator.
trick, terminator is
Mhm.
a sequence. But if you then do require that, yeah, there has to be a transition in it, that
Yeah.
there is got to be more than one trick, then no, yeah, there are no combos without transitions.
Quick hot take and ironing out the combo definition. I think a combo can most easily be described as or a combo should have a requirement of at least two tricks.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
therefore must include a transition.
Which
All right.
it has a funny outcome in the sense that like when I hear people talk about like single hitters, I honestly in my head I'm like, oh yeah, like doing TDR punch quad, but that's a combo. Like you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
there's
It's a
still
two
two
hitter.
tricks there. The only way you could do a one hitter is like literally like you just
Standing
backflip in
pulls.
place or
Yeah.
I guess J step cord
J-step quirk, yes.
is J step
An
what
It's
is
initiator.
initiator.
okay.
More
Yeah,
on initiators at a later date.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
But for right now, we're still talking about transitions. So yeah, transitions are all of the other parts of a combo besides the tricks, the initiators, and the terminators.
Mm.
All
Term
right.
and wait, had to we talk about term? We don't have to like
Not
go
really,
that
but
in
yeah,
depth, but
yeah, we don't need to go too in depth. But again, just like an initiator is a movement that you can do that precedes a combo that isn't itself considered a trick,
mm-hmm.
a terminator is a movement that you can do exiting a combo that isn't itself a trick, but also isn't considered a failure state for the combo. So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, uh, you know, ideally you just land your last trick and then you landed it in your last landing stance and there was no further need to do any extra motion. But oftentimes people will need to like step or stumble or do some other more regularized motion out of it in order to maintain their momentum and not fall and touch their hands or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
We would that is what we would call a terminator.
Right.
If it doesn't itself make it to the point of being what you would consider to be a trick,
Hmm.
then it is a Terminator.
Unless you're sticking literally every single trick you do, you're doing a Terminator.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
doing some kind of, yeah, and I think pretty much every tricker does that. So,
Well,
um,
even if you stick a trick and the act of walking away from the floor is
are
a
we
Terminator.
do we give like a time period like after 5 seconds of sticking, you're done. Like there's
It
nothing.
has to
No,
be
no,
it has to
it's
be immediate. It has to be the very next thing you do.
yeah, exactly.
I,
It's not a time thing. It's a more matter of like, the combo is clearly over.
mm-hmm,
There's no more tricks being performed.
mm-hmm.
The statute of limitations has been met
Yeah.
on.
And a pause, by the way, just landing, sticking it, and just pausing and standing there. That is also the next immediate thing. So it wouldn't be like if you paused there and then like did something else afterwards. That thing you did afterwards wouldn't be your Terminator. Like
Mm.
your pause has already was the immediate thing you did after. So
Oh, okay. So you're talking about okay. I see. I also like to think about the idea of like we're always doing a combo, like we're just doing some kind
yeah,
of like
always, no matter what.
stumble or walk
Okay,
between them.
guys, we're getting distracted. So,
Okay,
all
sorry.
right. So now that we've given a brief description of what the different elements of a combo are,
Hmm.
and that what today we're talking about specifically are transitions, what we wanted to speak about transitions was the fact that they have a very interesting structure that makes it easy to describe more complicated examples of transitions
Hmm.
using fundamentally simpler ones. There are basic building blocks, really essentially simple transitions, that all other transitions are made out of in a very regular way.
Hmm.
So first, we would like to present those basic building block
Hmm.
transitions, and then we'd like to give you an example of some of the multi-step transitions that end up using multiple of these basic building blocks in order to compose themselves.
Yeah. So
So go for it.
yeah, I was gonna say we kind of split these up. Oh, the way we named it, super not creative, but this first tier, second tier, and third tier. Every other word we kind of came up with like either already existed or would have made it confusing, and I think this is the best way of splitting it up. Um, there are different ways to split up transitions, which we will get to later.
Or
Um,
different classifications more
mhm,
aptly.
ex-
But
yeah.
yeah, we find that if when examining them from this perspective, it doesn't necessarily matter whether the transition is sequential or I'm sorry, a single leg or unified, right? Because
Hmm.
there are just fundamentally simple acts
Hmm.
that can happen, like punch and rapid, for example, being similar, the only difference between them being, one leg or two legs.
Yeah. So you're kind of hitting on it. So first tier is essentially made up of swing, rapid, misleg, and punch, which these are, like Bryce was saying, the fundamental building blocks of all the rest of the transitions that we're going to be talking about. And now here some of these are very easy to kind of visualize. Obviously, we know what swing and punch are. I don't think we have to go too much into detail about that. But there does tend to be a lot of confusion around rapid and misleg, and sometimes people will use them interchangeably, actually. But we kind of gave our own rigorous definition here in Talkin Tricks that I think works really well. Um, but essentially, the way that we define is a rapid is any single leg takeoff that does not swing and also goes with your direction of momentum. And so, what I mean by not swinging is that there's no passage of your swing leg past the plane that your plant leg makes. So, um, an example of that would be like, I don't know, let's say you landed something incomplete, but you landed complete with your leg in front of you, and then you went straight into a gainer. That would be a rapid, essentially. So, does anyone want to talk about misleg?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of is essentially implied by the way that you stated rapid.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you said that rapid was any single-legged transition, one, and by that you mean it only uses one leg and one step, only
Mm-hmm.
one time that you've placed your foot on the ground, and you go with your direction of motion without doing a conventional swing through.
Mm-hmm.
So no plain passage by your swing leg.
Mm-hmm.
So for a misleg, the only thing that we're going to switch out for here, because obviously if we switched out the plain passage by our swing leg, we would just get a swing through.
Right.
So that's already accounted for. So the
Mhm.
only other thing we can modify is the direction of motion change.
Mhm.
So we're going to go ahead and nix that and say that a misleg is going to be your single leg one-step transition where your direction of motion changes.
Mhm. Exactly.
This is most easily seen with something like scoot to B twist. If you don't place the right leg down for left twisters,
Mhm.
you would be functionally returning to the same, like, your scoot only ends in 180 degrees, and
Mhm.
then you would take off in the opposite direction that you began your combo in.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
that is an example of your dom or direction of motion,
Yeah.
travel, whatever we want to call it.
And I would say it's even more than just like going like exactly opposite of your dom. I would say it's anything that doesn't go exactly with your dom is
Yeah.
misleg. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, to expand on that further, yeah, anything that would shift your dom even perpendicularly, right? So even a
Mhm.
slight direction of a slight or an over rotation
Mhm.
or an over amount of direction of motion change, right?
Mhm.
So 270 or 90-degree change would also be considered a misleg. So there's a lot of room for it to be misleg and not a lot of room for it to be rapid.
Yeah. So I would say if you're listening to this podcast and you want to take away one thing, I would love for people to take away this because I think this is something that hasn't been, I guess, disseminated uh, very widely, but I think makes a lot of sense. And it will make even more sense when we talk about second tier tricks and what they're made out of. Misleg becomes an integral part of that. And so I think it is very important to have a distinction between rapid and misleg, especially because now there's not really a rigorous one. I've seen people say like, oh, aerial rapid A twist is actually misleg. Like they'll say misleg for that.
Yeah, like a mega aerial rapid B twist
Mhm.
would be aerial misleg B twist or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly that.
yeah. Sorry if I didn't say mega. But yeah, so that's essentially first tier. I mean, is there anything else you guys want to say about the first tier tricks or transitions?
No,
Yeah,
just
did
again
we?
to highlight that they are going to be that these first tier transitions are going to be essentially combined with other like sequences and foot patterns
Mm-hmm.
that are going to show up again in second tier.
Mm-hmm.
So second tier transitions are actually going to have a wider variety, originally called sequential transitions,
Mm-hmm.
but in with this tiering system, we're going to see how we can actually kind of expand the definition of what we have like historically understood as things like vanish, and we can actually do quite a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And these are actually demonstrable things too that we can see within tricks themselves. Like it's not necessarily just something that we're making up that you can just do these things. And I think in practice you'll see them, but you'll also see them in clips of your friends doing them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, so we've got our basic building blocks. We've got the unified building block, the punch. We've got our various single leg building blocks, including swing, rapid, and misleg. And so when we move over to second tier, we're going to be making compound transitions out of two of these guys.
Mm-hmm. And
So
compound transitions used to be used for redirect and bound, just so I don't know, because there might be some confusion there.
yeah,
That's
now,
why we
now
that's why we scrapped that. Like we just.
yeah, exactly. Now compound transitions are literally everything except for all of the guys that I just mentioned a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
Punch, misleg, rapid, and swing. Those guys are not compound, but everything else that we're going to talk about now, these guys are compound. And the reason is because they're made out of, they're
Mm-hmm.
composed of these basic elements. And we've thrown around vanish, which is probably the most popular and common transition
Mm-hmm.
throughout all of tricking. It's got multiple ways that you can make it out of the various single leg basic tricks or
Mm-hmm.
basic transitions, excuse me. So rapid and swing are commonly the components that people are going to use to make their vanishes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I'm sure it wouldn't take very much time to figure out how we could come up with an example, a not too crazy example of a way to use a misleg rapid or a rapid misleg
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah. Well, even like so, I like the first thing that pops in my head is skip. So for those who don't know what a skip is, it's essentially 1-1-2-2. So land one leg, take off that leg, land the other leg, take off that other leg. I think one of the most common ways of doing that is a swing swing. So it's composed of two swings, and this is like doing, for example, your scoot and then skipping into a rise. So it's like you swung, you did a little turn, and then you're swinging again into that front swing. And and this actually brings up a really good point. So there is kind of a fine line between actually specifically skips, and like a trick, because you don't want to rotate too much to the point where it becomes a trick. So there's an arbitrary 270-degree cutoff where it's, if you're skipping and you're past that, that's no longer a skip. That becomes a trick in itself. So I think that's really important to kind of point out.
Yeah, there is like an in-air rotation limit, but there isn't like a minimum limit required either. You can technically like skip
Place.
by just jumping from one leg to the other leg without doing any in-air rotation, and this still meets the qualifications of skip, because these sequential transitions are more focused on patterns of the feet touching and leaving the ground, rather than any amount of like specific motion being performed. And this ambiguity is what honestly allows for a lot of these compound transitions and their permutations to exist.
Exactly. So to be clear, we actually haven't named all the second tier, so I want to go ahead and do that. But
Yes.
Vanish, which would be 1-2-1-2, kind of like what I was describing before.
But instead of hopping from your first leg onto your second leg, and there being very deliberate air time between the two foot placements, there's going to be a period of time in which both of your feet are on the ground at the same time in any Vanish.
Vanish and Skip, actually, interestingly enough, we kind of noticed that they share the same mapping of what different first tier transitions you could do, but Bryce kind of highlighted the differences. Are you in the air during, one transition, which would be skip, or are you touching the ground the whole time, essentially? So yeah, that's Vanish. Carry through would be, what is it, 1-1-1-1 is
Correct.
Carry through is. So it only uses one leg the whole time. And then we have reverse pop. Actually, let's do pop first. Pop would be 1-2 and then unified takeoff. So that's like kind of like your scoot full is kind of the easiest way to think about that. Reverse pop is the opposite of that. So you land unified and you take off 1-2. Reversal is what is it? 1-2-2-1.
Yep.
And then we have.
And we already mentioned.
And this is actually where we start to see things like misleg show up in combos, or in transitions, compound transitions, because this is more than likely where your dom would shift when you perform a reversal. But it's not required again, because again, like in-air rotation is not a requisite for transitions in any way, shape, or form. These sequential transitions focus more on the sequence or foot pattern, again, of feet entering and leaving the ground.
Yeah.
Now, so when we're looking at something like pop and asking ourselves the question of like, all right, how is it made out of the first order transitions, the first tiers? Well, we can go ahead and see how we're going to be landing one foot first and then bringing our 2 feet together again for our takeoff. So our takeoff is very clearly the same takeoff as the punch takeoff from our first tier.
Yeah.
Whereas the first step, the one that brings us into it, it really depends on how much leg motion our non-landing leg is going through. It could do anything from a swing to a rapid, potentially even to a misleg, though I haven't seen someone misleg pop before, but I imagine it would like.
Oh, I know how you can misleg pop. It'd be like you do a scoot, but then you pop front, is what I would say.
Okay.
Because there's a dom shift there,
Okay, yeah. So yeah, pop with like a forward trick. All right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool ways. So like honestly, this is kind of the reason why we're bringing this up, is because this is really good to experiment with. There's like, honestly, the sky's the limit here. There's like literally no limit to, I mean, probably not literally no limit, but an unfathomable human limit to what you can do here. So yeah, just mix and match whatever you want. Bryce is calculating right now if this is infinite or not. But
well, I mean, like,
it's definitely not infinite. There's just what we're trying to express is that we currently have a lot more availability with transition experimentation than we currently see in the mainstream. And I think also we actually can find like really niche examples or examples of these really niche versions of these typical transitions
Mm-hmm.
by re-examining existing clips as well, and
Yeah.
just being like, oh, what I used to consider this has actually really been, this example of this R pop or reversal.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it just I previously understood it to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's one more level of things that you're allowed to choose when it comes to the visual style of your combo. Like you want it to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
You like the way that certain skips, like the way that certain redirects, certain transitions look with tricks that you do or with certain tricks that you do.
Mm-hmm.
This gives you the ability to think more to include more specificity in that choice in your combos.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the sort of person who's interested in that, that's what this is meant to serve.
Yeah.
And it's totally optional too. We're not suggesting that these different types of reversals, vanishes, carry throughs, or anything besides their parent naming. Like they are just permutations of this trick or this, I'm sorry, this transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there are no like new transitions that we're presenting here. It's all just a way of organizing the existing transitions that we have in terms of a very interesting structure that emerges from looking at them with this sort of building block perspective in mind.
Yeah. I do want to take this moment to actually there was a comment that we got on a video recently of someone who was kind of upset that we used a lot of different words. And I do want to make it clear that like I hope that our audience doesn't see us as like coming up with words just to come up with words, because we really do try to keep everything as close to mainstream as possible, because we realize it is really fucking difficult to like adopt a new phrase or change people's minds on something like that. So when we introduce new terms, it's like almost absolutely necessary to make logical sense of what we're talking about, if that makes any sense. But yeah, this is not an example of that. We literally stick with everything that has been used in mainstream. So yeah. Um, all right. I mean, do you guys have anything else to say about second tier or?
Nope, yep. We've presented all of the overarching families. Again, these are all things like vanish, carry through, reverse pop, pop. They're families of transitions because they represent different based on those landing patterns,
Mm-hmm.
landing and takeoff patterns that Frank gave for them before. They represent different ways that you could go ahead and slot in different first tier transitions
Mm-hmm.
into those different landing and takeoff feet. Uh, in order to make something that constitutes a vanish or a reverse pop or what have you. But it isn't just that there is a vanish transition and a skip transition and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we've seen that for second tier, we only have one tier left to go, and that's actually important to recognize. We don't go up onto fourth and fifth and sixth tier transitions because at a certain point, if you take too many steps between tricks, we just consider that to be a new combo.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of steps is four. You have
Mm-hmm.
3 steps between combos, or between tricks, excuse me, in one combo. And if you exceed that,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. You have started a new combo.
I agree. So yeah, the limit is third tier, which just is made up of redirect and bound. And now redirect and bound honestly probably has the biggest width of any other transition because of how many steps there are, and there's so many different permutations of how you can put them together. Um, but simplest redirect is the one that you do from sideswipe into TDR. That is an example of redirect, and probably the most often one that's done. Um, but there's a million other redirects you can do, and like one that our friend Alex does all the time is he does a tornado kick, and he does essentially a bunch of steps and ends up swinging into a gainer or something. Um, and you can kind of figure out those steps by yourself, but there's a million different ways to do it. So um,
Not literally a million, but
there might be.
Yeah.
there are many ways, and that is needful work that is needed to be performed on our half that we will be making an effort to present in a transitions explained further video. But
Yeah, where we
right,
actually
yeah.
like list out all of the different ways that you could make these compound transitions out of the first tiers. We know that it can be done in principle.
Yeah.
We just haven't done the work of of writing down the complete list of it because mostly no one would care. But uh, no one yet we think would really care about it all that much. But at some point in the future, we're just going to do it for our own sake.
Mm-hmm.
But we needed this done because we have ideas on how to get started with a language project that we've
Mm-hmm.
been working on for some time now,
Mm-hmm.
and we really wanted uh, this idea about transitions and how they're made, this aspect of their structure. We wanted it clearly enunciated
Mm-hmm.
before we went on to initiate that language project because
Mm-hmm.
parts of this is going to be weaved into that.
Yeah. And I also want to bring up that we have talked about everyone who's watched our compound transition episode from way back when knows that me and Jason sat there and literally listed every like redirect and bound that
Or we
exists.
attempted to at least.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually did do it, but that was arduous work. But the funny thing about that is, like, I think what we basically did was, okay, this redirect is a vanish with a reversal in the middle, or this one's a carry through and a reverse, or I guess like skip put together or something like that. And we kind of went like that. But now that I think about it, there's a lot more versions of vanish and carry through that exist. So really, you have to like multiply what
Yeah, it's exponential
what we
in
did.
all actuality. It's just the amount of redirects and bounds are just kind of endless due to the like number of steps taken and the sheer variation that can be presented within it. And based on this, like how we can perform even the lower tier components, like second and first tier components that make up these third tier tricks, or sorry, third tier transitions.
Yeah.
Um, and because of that increased variety, it also increases the amount of like opportunity for uh, additional permutations in these transitions.
Yeah. And so we actually haven't talked about bound yet, but bound is a very uh, not commonly
Niche is a
used.
nice way to say it. Okay.
Yeah, I think like the only trick I know that like frequently used bound was like Pot Yo Anderson from like way back when.
Yep.
But essentially, it's a redirect, but there's a unified portion of it at some point. It could be at the end, at the beginning, middle. So,
Right. At some point, in a similar way to how Vanish is both lands single leg and takes off single leg, but features a point in time when both feet are on the ground. Bound has this similar property in which it's a redirect, but one of the landing stances or takeoffs that is used within the bound itself is unified and not sequential. So it's not a purely sequential transition. It's one
mhm,
that features unified landing or takeoff.
exactly. I think this is also a good spot to bring up other classifications of transitions. So you've heard us say single leg and sequential and unified here. Um, but we have kind of like a rigorous definition of how to use those terms. So things like swing, rapid, and misleg are all single leg transitions. Uh, but there's a first tier transition that is not a single leg. It's punch, which is unified, right? Um, and then we also have sequential, which is made up of uh, vanish. Is carry through? Yeah, carry through.
Hmm.
I would say
Carry through
sequential.
is technically is both single leg and sequential. It features a sequence of one leg.
Yeah, so I think I'd call it sequential
I guess so.
because it has
It
that.
is literally both, but
Well, yeah, all of them. So essentially, yeah, vanish, carry through, reverse pop. I would consider to be sequential, and this is something we discussed. And you would think maybe, oh, like, is it not unified because it has a unified at some point? Um, the definition that we came up with for sequential versus unified is what is the ending takeoff, right? So if the ending takeoff is unified, then it is a unified trick or a unified transition. I keep saying trick. Um, but if it ends in a sequence, then it's a sequential takeoff
Yeah,
transition.
if it ends with one of the single leg basic transitions,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore it allows you to do single legged tricks out of it,
Mm-hmm.
that's how we would break this up. And so that means that while even though every single bound has somewhere in it
Mm-hmm.
a first tier transition that's unified, it has a punch somewhere in it. Not all of the bounds are unified transitions because some of them don't take off 2 feet.
Yeah.
Some of them, the last transition is actually a single leg, and you can do something single-legged out of it.
Exactly.
I will refute really quick that redirect or bound doesn't necessarily include a punch transition, as punch requires both feet to land and then take off. There are bounds that don't include that. Like a bound could be more aptly pop or reverse pop as well.
Oh, I mean,
So I
pop
guess
pop doesn't pop is made out of punch in the same
Oh,
way,
that's
but it
true.
doesn't have the thing that it doesn't have like the full punch that you're describing. What
I
it does
think I
have,
think it is a variation of punch is probably a better or at least more accurate way to
that throws a
describe it.
that throws a wrench in our whole operation, Jason.
I think yeah. I think
I'm gonna disagree with that. But I've been vetoed this entire time.
I think what Bryce is saying is first. It's a first tier. Like punch is a first tier, so by definition, yeah, you're saying it's made of pop. I would agree with that, but pop is thusly made of punch, so there is also a punch in there. Does that make sense?
No, because punch is literally like it is a defined thing. Like yeah,
Right.
it has a unified landing and a unified takeoff, and it features the unified takeoff. But like punch, literally lands 2 feet, takes off 2 feet. It's transition all in its own.
Yeah, but pop lands
Features pop features parts of
sequentially, and then once your feet are together, that's the unified start, and then you take off 2 feet, and that's the unified end. So there's a punch within pop, is what I'm saying.
I guess in a very technical sense,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, and that's the entire justification of its inclusion in the second tier.
Yeah. But I understand what you're saying, that you can also make the differentiation that, oh, you did a pop in the middle of this bound versus you did a punch in the middle of this bound. That is still a useful distinction to make because it describes what the transition looks like. I think Bryce is just being very technical.
Yeah, just meaning that somewhere in there is that particular one transition from the first tier that involves 2 feet.
That's really what it is. You could actually split it up either way. You could be like, oh, you did a bound and there's a pop in the middle, or you could say there's a bound and you did a swing punch in the middle, and it kind of they're both true. If that swing punch is pop. Anyway, that's how confusing bound is, by the way, guys.
Or any of this.
Yeah, exactly. But to get back to kind of what Bryce was saying about the sequential versus unified, it is a very useful distinction to make by describing what's at the end, because it informs what tricks you could do out of it. So it might seem confusing at first, but I promise there's a reason for it. But yeah, is there anything else you guys want to say about third tier tricks? Or oh my god, dude. I'm just gonna scrap
Yeah, no,
this whole
I've
thing 'cause
already
I just keep
no,
saying
seriously,
tricks.
I've already called them tricks in here at some point too. Like I just want to I want to shoot. Yeah, anyway. So I won't finish that. You get where I'm going. But yeah, no, there isn't too much more. Once you've heard us describe the second tier, you hopefully should be getting what the third tier is all about. There's really just a whole lot more examples wrapped up into into one name between redirect and bound. And now that we've also given you some idea of further delineations, further subcategorizations that we use for these things based on their ending stance, based on the way you come out of it, which, as Frank mentioned, thereby determines what tricks you can do afterwards. That's basically as far as we've thought on this guy. That represents the sum total of that structure that we've been able to notice and exactly piece together ourselves. So from there, yeah, what we're hoping to see as a result of this is just more interesting examples of the transitions that we already use. So it would be cool to see ones that we don't see as often. And if you're the sort of person who does like doing tricks or combos that feature things that people aren't used to seeing, then this is a potentially really easy way of going about doing it, because man, do you have a lot of options. Like there are a lot of permutations to work out here.
Yeah, really use all this to your advantage. Make your combos really cool. I think, like we mentioned, at some point we'll probably have like a full list, maybe an Excel sheet, maybe an episode I don't know, describing what all the different transitions are, but yeah, look forward to that. Yeah, I think that's it. Unless you guys have anything else to say, I think that's a good place to end off. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. You can check out our Patreon down in the link in the description. And yeah, let us know what
Your
transitions you
thoughts
guys
on
are
this
doing.
content. Yep.
Yep. Bye, guys.